Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Syrian peace talks have been put on hold in Geneva as a Russian-backed offensive has intensified north of Aleppo. UN mediator Staffan de Mistura said he hopes the talks will resume in 3 weeks.
This is not the end, and it's not the failure of the talks. Why? They came and they stayed. Not only, but both sides insisted on the fact that they are interested in having the political process started.
The peace talks are the first attempt in 2 years to negotiate an end to Syria's war that's claimed the lives of nearly 300,000 people and displaced roughly half the country's population. Meanwhile, new footage filmed from a drone shows shocking images from the Syrian city of Homs. 5 years ago, 1 million people lived in the city. Today, the city is devastated, a virtual ghost town. The footage was shot by a Russian television station. The BBC is reporting a United Nations panel's ruled in favor of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, who says he's been arbitrarily detained for the past 3.5 years because he cannot leave the Ecuadorian embassy in London without being arrested by British authorities. Assange sought asylum in the embassy to avoid extradition to Sweden. Earlier this morning, Assange said he will accept arrest by British police if the UN ruled against him. We'll speak with one of his lawyers after headlines. In campaign news, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Senator Bernie Sanders sparred over who was a true progressive at a town hall event in New Hampshire.
I do not know any progressive who has a super PAC and takes $15 million from Wall Street. That's just not progressive. As I mentioned earlier, the key foreign policy vote of modern American history was the war in Iraq. The progressive community was pretty united in saying, don't listen to Bush, don't go to war. Secretary Clinton voted to go to war.
Later in the town hall event, Anderson Cooper of CNN asked Hillary Clinton about her ties to Goldman Sachs.
One of the things that Senator Sanders points to and a lot of your critics point to is you made 3 speeches for Goldman Sachs. You were paid $675,000 for 3 speeches. Was that a mistake? I mean, was that a bad error in judgment?
Look, I made speeches to lots of groups. I told them what I thought. I answered questions.
But did you have to be paid $675,000?
Well, I don't know. That's what they offered. So.
In related news, Goldman Sachs CEO Lloyd Blankfein has described Bernie Sanders' candidacy as a, quote, dangerous moment during an interview with CNBC. Sanders recently attacked Goldman Sachs in a campaign ad. In 2008, Blankfein endorsed and donated money to Hillary Clinton's campaign, but he's not endorsed her this time around. He said on Wednesday, quote, I don't want to help or hurt anybody by giving them an endorsement. Politico reports his wife, Laura Blankfein, has donated the $2,700 maximum to Clinton's 2016 campaign. In other campaign news, Donald Trump has accused Senator Ted Cruz of stealing the Iowa caucus by spreading rumors that Dr. Ben Carson had suspended his campaign just prior to the opening of the caucus. Trump, who ended up placing second behind Cruz, demanded a redo of the vote.
Oh, that voter fraud. You know, these politicians are brutal. They're brutal. They are brutal. They are a bunch of dishonest cookies, I want to tell you. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this. It's one of the reasons.
On Wednesday, Ted Cruz defended the actions of his campaign team.
Our political team passed on a CNN news story that CNN broke. The news story said that Ben Carson was not continuing from Iowa on to New Hampshire. He was not continuing to South Carolina. Instead, he was going home to Florida. That was a news story CNN had posted. And our political team passed it on to our supporters. It was breaking news that was relevant.
CNN responded to Cruz's comments by saying, quote, Senator Cruz's claims about CNN are false. At no point did the network indicate Dr. Carson would suspend his campaign, CNN said. President Obama visited the Islamic Society of Baltimore in Catonsville, Maryland, Wednesday in his first trip to a mosque as president. He declared that attacks on Islam are an attack on all religions.
If we're serious about freedom of religion, and I'm speaking now to my fellow Christians who remain the majority in this country, we have to understand attack on one faith is an attack on all our faiths.
Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump, who has a record of suggesting President Obama might secretly be a Muslim born overseas, later discussed Obama's visit to the mosque on Fox News.
We can go to lots of places. Right now, I don't know if maybe he feels comfortable there. We have a lot of problems in this country, Greta. There are a lot of places he can go, and he chose a mosque.
One of the world's biggest multinational trade deals, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, has been signed by 12 member nations in New Zealand. It'll now undergo a 2-year ratification period in which at least 6 countries must approve the final text for the deal to be implemented. We'll have more on the TPP with Lori Wallach in the broadcast. A congressional hearing was held Wednesday to probe lead poisoning in the water supply of Flint, Michigan. Lawmakers sharply criticized both Michigan officials as well as the Environmental Protection Agency. The crisis began after an unelected emergency manager appointed by Michigan Governor Rick Snyder switched the source of Flint's drinking water to the corrosive and contaminated Flint River. Committee Democrats criticized the Republican leadership for not inviting Snyder to testify. Flint resident Leanne Walters, who helped expose the lead poisoning, testified at the hearing.
The citizens in Flint are relying on each of you because we have no choice. We trust no one but Virginia Tech. There are people in Flint today still not being assisted during this crisis. Illegal immigrants, disabled, and shut-ins. Broken policy and procedures are smothering the outcry of an entire community suffering financially, physically, mentally, and emotionally.
We'll have more on Flint later in the broadcast, as well as an exclusive on prisoners in Flint being forced to shower and drink the polluted water. In criminal justice news, a record 149 people in the United States were exonerated last year. On average, the exonerated prisoners had spent 14 years behind bars for crimes they did not commit. Some had spent more than 3 decades. The majority of the exonerations occurred in Texas and New York. And in news from Baltimore, DeRay McKesson, one of the nation's most high-profile Black Lives Matter activists, has announced he's running for mayor of Baltimore. He joins 12 candidates in the Democratic primary seeking to replace Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.